I mean, even my 81-year-old mom trusts AI. ARP has to send out bulletins about AI. They've never done that about TCP or cloud. Think about that. And so it's affecting so many segments of society. Of course, business wants to take advantage of that. But of course, we need better controls in place, and we need to rethink governance, not as a hindrance to business, but as an enabler. And governance needs to be more innovative. We need to be part of that innovation. Compliance should not be complex. As a business leader, you should know what are my top 5 compliance regulations, internal standards I have to comply with. If I were going to be on the evening news, which one would impact my ability to either get budget, my company's reputation, or our ability to even trade on the stock market? And I think when you start thinking about compliance like that, it becomes a business enabler instead of, oh my God, here comes audit. I've got to answer this 100-page checklist. And then as CISO, you need to really start redefining what is your environment, right? And so that traditional, anything inside my firewall is mine, you probably need to start really rethinking that. Is that really still true? And one of the things I saw here recently that really opened my eyes was SquareX's presentation at Tech Field Day. So that expanding where the threats are actually coming into that browser level, that EDR, that extension level. So people are using the technology different. Are there protections in place out even to the parts of your environment you never even thought a threat could come through?
Artificial intelligence is reshaping how we work, but are we building it responsibly? Today, I'm joined by Marian Newsome, founder of Ethical Tech Matters, one of only 100 IEEE certified lead assessors in the world. Marian helps Fortune 500 companies turn regulatory risk into competitive advantage and co-hosts her own podcast, The Tech Aunties. I'm excited to be hosting her today. Welcome, Marian.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today around artificial intelligence, and my specialty is really around governance.
Great. I think our listeners are going to have an opportunity to learn a lot from you, because it's a very good time to be having this conversation, I think.
Oh, I think so too. Conditions out here in the world, and as we see AI evolve so fast, governance has to catch up. It can't be a bolt-on this time around.
Absolutely. So you've spent nearly 2 decades in enterprise governance and founded your own company, Ethical Tech Matters. Tell us about your journey into AI governance and how you got started in the field. Was there a moment you realized traditional compliance approaches weren't working for AI?
So my career journey in compliance started, my IT origin story, I was actually interested, and I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I thought I was going to save the world from all these injustices through, of all things, trademark law. Like you can really, fight injustice there. But to put my way through school, I was actually working as an immigration officer, which is a hot topic today too. And back then, and I'm aging myself a little bit, but that's why they call me the OG of the Tech Aunties, of the podcast I host with Gina Rosenthal. But back then, we used to have to use what they call sound dictionaries to check people's immigration status. And I happened to be at the airport working, and they said, you know what, this is tedious. Let's bring in a computer, and who wants to do it? I was volunteered for it, and that's how I got into IT, setting up those systems. But as I was setting them up and we were doing fines for airlines, one day I just decided, hey, maybe this computer thing is for me. And as I got into the computer world, came in through cybersecurity, I found out that my real true passion is auditing. I love to audit. I love to know why. My personality is I will ask why 5 different times, 5 different ways. Drove my parents crazy, drives everyone in my life crazy now. But for auditing, it's perfect. And so as AI came onto the scene, start to see some of the things we had challenges with in IT in the past. Systems actually outpacing governance, outpacing the controls, things like privacy by design, ethics by design, not really being built into it. And so that's when I really got fascinated with AI. What is AI? And why? Why is governance a bolt-on there too?
Governance often follows new technologies, right? Meaning it's like the business decides that there's an opportunity or the opportunity presents itself in the marketplace. And then as business leaders, they begin to chase those opportunities. And we don't know. And there's so many ideas of how this technology is going to be used in the marketplace, and lots of ideas and use cases come up for technology to follow. And then folks are just engineers, developers are begin to build systems, and then they get put into the marketplace. And then everyone starts to wonder, is this safe? Is this good? Are we doing the right things around it, or whatever the questions are about it? And then that's when governance kind of starts to follow it seems like until something's out there, people don't really start thinking about how to govern it, because it's almost like vaporware. I mean, are you going to govern vaporware?
Exactly.
But when you see something that's actually being presented, then you can start saying, hey, is this going to be good for society, good for our business? Is there ethical considerations that we need to be thinking of? But I think it's somewhat natural that governance kind of follows. But
no.
You don't think so?
So I think that's the way it's always been, right? That's the status quo. We hear the ROI, we hear the use cases, business leaders get excited about it, people get excited about it, and business just takes off. And so governance becomes a bolt-on. In AI governance, it's really quite simple. The pace of the systems, if we fall behind with governance, there is no bolt-on. We already are using people's data. We're creating new data sets through AI. The different use cases requires human oversight. So we have to, with AI governance, which is fast-paced governance on steroids, we have to start looking at those controls upfront and as soon as possible.
I'd love to hear more about this. I was just starting my tenure at Dyson as CISO. Gen AI had just come out. ChatGPT had just come out. For me, I did a really quick threat model to kind of figure out, like, hey, what is it that we're trying to protect, right? What's the intellectual property? What is it? What are the outcomes that are going to be associated with it? And try to put some guidance in place. One, let people know that we already have an existing IT governance in place that would help us with the product selections and how we go through the process of procurement for Gen AI tools in particular. But I wanted to get guidance out really fast, like just give people some guidelines on what to do, what not to do, good technology architectures where we should be considering, which ones we shouldn't, and get that in place as quickly as possible so that people could start having some framework to use. Even after I wrote the email to everyone saying, hey, this is what we want to do, I think it took me 8 months to get through legal to get it actually published, right? It took a long time. Lots of questions that we have about it. At that time, there were way fewer AI products than there are today. I mean, I think that, a webinar I did a couple of months ago, maybe 2,500 AI startups that were doing all sorts of things there. So I'm super curious on what was the right approach for getting governance in place ahead of the outbreak of ChatGPT launching. Was there something else that I should have done? I was actually surprised by Gen AI and ChatGPT and how quickly it was adopted. I mean, I think they said they had like 100 million users in less than 2 months. I don't know if I've seen anything adopted so quickly.
Well, it's the convenience factor, right? So if we look at everyday products, if you turn on your TV right now, there's probably some product advertising AI powered or AI assistant. You can't even browse the web anymore without getting all of these. We use AI. And so I agree, the adoption is one of the things in governance we actually kind of say, oh, wait a minute, because it's probably one of the few technologies that people en masse are trusting, right? Without knowing the model, without knowing the rules behind the LLM, not knowing whose data is it using, what of your data is it using. We believe all the use cases that are out there, it can either help us do anything from complete our grocery list on a smart refrigerator to end the world, right? And so all of this innovation and creativity, it sparks curiosity. But in the corporate environment, governance, we also have a challenge. We have to be willing to kind of break out of that traditional mindset and say, it has to be this way. You have to have this in place. That's true. But at the pace it's moving, we also have to really simplify what is AI? What is the use case? What is the data? What is the privacy concern? And now we have all these new AI regulations. I think we've seen real world cases where AI governance has gone bad, right? So if we had had stronger governance, if someone had have sat down like you and said, I want to build a strategy, even though I'm under pressure from my business leaders to make this make money. And it's probably one of the few technologies that business leaders who have external financial goals and internal financial goals all have the same pressure to implement it as soon as possible.
Definitely, there's a lot of pressure, I think, from the board and executive committees and the CEO saying that, hey, how do we take advantage of AI? I think that's one of the pressures that, both in, like you said, both internal pressures and external pressures, that are, looking for productivity gains or how do we get to market faster with the products that we use, it's from an internal perspective. And then how do we get those products out and how do we provide features to our customers so that's something that they want to buy?
Right.
Those are definitely different than most other technologies that I can think of right now. I mean, I think the last time I thought about something as similar might be, when people started doing e-commerce on websites back in the late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere in that time period. It's similar. It's like, what is it that we have to do to make this safe? And, we got SSL certificates and that kind of stuff so that we knew that this was a trusted place that we could transact. But there is definitely a lot of pressure. And I think the use cases are also somewhat fanciful, right? In a lot of ways. We're talking about, people are talking about AGI. You had this broad spectrum of where it could help and where the extinction level events on the AGI part. That's something that people are talking about as well. And, and I continue to be curious about how is it that we govern this? Because I do think that like the AI regulations that the EU is putting forth are kind of more draconian than they need to be so that we can actually take advantage of the business opportunities in the space, right? And to the point where I think that we have a lot of big companies that don't want to do AI in the EU because they don't want to conform to those regulations, which puts EU, I think, in a bad competitive space.
Right.
You definitely want to get ahead of extinction level events. We definitely want to do that. Please do that. But at the same time, I think we do also need to let business have a little bit of latitude to look for opportunities that make sense. But I'm going to say that, but I'm going to preface it with it. But we've also seen AI being used poorly, making credit decisions. I mean, I think the one that's in my head is the Apple, Goldman Sachs, the Apple Card thing, where there's definitely bias inside the models on who gets better credit lines, et cetera. So there's definitely cases of where AI has been used poorly, that governance needs to be present in those models. But again, I'm kind of thinking about that's an actual use case that I can learn from, right? The extinction level events and AGI and where that's going. I'm struggling with how do I put governance around that? Because those become national geopolitical kind of problems,
right?
And there's people that know what's going on inside those spaces that, you and I don't have access to, and that are enclosed skiffs inside the military that are trying to figure that stuff out. I don't think everyone's having those conversations.
But it's still the threat. If I think about it, and you're challenging me this morning with the global extinction events, but if I really think about it, it's really the same three principles for governance, right? Honesty, right? Transparency. What am I doing? What is this use case? What is the expected outcome of this algorithm? So I have to have accuracy in data. I have to understand my use case. I have to test my algorithm. I have to make sure it complies with regulations for privacy, data, internal standards. That's still governance. And then I have to have preventive and detective controls for if my credit application is denied unfairly, or if I launch a missile at an enemy I'm not anticipating. So I still have to have those three governance. So still the same controls: preventive, detective, reporting. And then on the data side, we've always had challenges, especially with customer data, IP data, and understanding where it's at, how are we protecting it, how are we governing it, how are we good stewards of the data. And that whole testing and algorithm, we should have been doing those. Those are basic principles in governance that AI still needs. The challenge comes in when there's a rush to business and we kind of forget those things. We're looking at the ROI. CISOs are under pressure with limited budgets now to automate, especially within the security world with firewall teams under pressure. Some of those jobs that are perceived as, we'll just stick AI there. You still need human oversight. And that's a big one internally. But externally, we still need to have customer consent, opt in, opt out. We still need to be able to defend our system's decisions. And with AI, that becomes even more critical, I think.
I like your approach. I mean, there was a transparency, understand the use cases. I think that's like when we started putting governance around our AI projects at Dyson, that's where we started. It's like, let's start collecting the use cases. Let's start, thinking about, what the data was. Where is that data? How are we going to use that data? There's definitely a business benefit, case for it. And, there we definitely made some ethical decisions of like how we would use AI and how we would not use AI, and Gen AI in particular. This is really around Gen AI kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Things like we were always going to use humans for our ads. We weren't going to like generate humans or fake humans and stuff in our ads. So that was an ethical consideration, right, that we had been making to kind of help our use cases as we're doing our use cases. What are our principles as a business that we can apply to the use cases? Say, is this something we want to do? Is this something we don't want to do? Right. And so I think, again, but part of it was just transparency. It's just like letting people have a chance to identify use cases and then, having the right kind of governance structures in place so that we could make decisions on it and then start coming up with the rules internally of like, how do we make decisions of, both legal and ethical kind of decisions that back to our own culture. Data, I think, plays a huge part in it. On the second part on data, it's like being able to control data. I think lots of companies are continuing to have struggles with how data is being used, where it's stored. And even though, like, I've said on many architectural review boards as a CISO and trying to look at like how applications are working and where the data is coming from and where the data is going, how it's being used, and asking the questions around that, what I found was that even after, we had made a decision about what was in scope and what was out of scope, the scopes change on minor versions of architecture. So you're always kind of having to go back and look and do data discovery and say, hey, is this still the case that we're using it the way we intended to use? And I think that's a struggle for a lot of companies as well, especially smaller businesses. I think that are probably the ones that want to do disruptive AI technologies. Their access to data, how they're going to use data, they're not going to have huge governance teams or big security teams to kind of control it, right? So I think that's somewhat of a risk. And then I think that, being able to defend your algorithms, I think that's another great point as well, because whenever we look at the transformers and other AI, and we as humans try to infer what it is that the AI is doing, how those decisions are being made, I'm not 100% sure that anyone knows how the decisions are being made, right? So I think there's a lot of analysis that needs to happen after the decision's made to figure out, is there bias in the algorithms? And those are kind of like after the outcome, seeing what the decisions were, and then kind of figuring out, has there been bias injected into this in some way? I'm worried that smaller companies in particular, startups in particular, the folks that are innovating in this space greatly, I worry that they don't also have the folks necessary to do that kind of an analytical work as well. It's kind of off the path of feature development and business value. The security and the compliance parts are going to kind of fall to the wayside or, not be given as much resources. And like you said, there was resource gaps here.
Right. But I think And not only for the startups, because if I think about myself, right, when I imagined my business, I didn't imagine spending 8 hours on taxes, right? And so it's not the cool part of being an entrepreneur or being a small business. It's just not. You want to execute your vision and your idea. And for larger companies, I think governance has become so reactive. There has to be a change in mindset to be proactive. So small businesses, you can be proactive. There are resources out there. There are responsible AI frameworks that are available. There are cheat guides. There are kits. You can reach out to me. I'll be more than willing to help you. But governance has to change from reactive in the AI space to proactive. We have to be engaged as quickly as possible. And so you mentioned the EU Act. When you look at those numbers, 7% of global revenue of coming out of the EU could be the penalties, right? That gets business leaders' attention. So how do we do that? They've just come out of implementing GDPR, which, let's face it, I don't want to say a crusade for the ages when it comes to governance, but it took a lot of time, energy, effort, took a lot of figuring out, still some vagueness, still some people lagging behind in doing that. And now you're putting this, like you said, really bureaucratic, very strict, high penalties, compliance on them. And so businesses are not seeing compliance as an edge to be able to say, we protect your data with integrity. Our AI is not creating other data sets, and we're creating digital twins of you behind the scene to know how you'll buy our products. And then for AI teams internally, I do think a lot of hype around who AI can replace instead of retraining existing governance professionals, IT professionals, privacy professionals, giving them certifications, knowledge, skill set to help with those challenges and making sure that the AI we put out is the AI we want to. It is the ethical version of AI. And if it's not, we have the controls to pull it back in instead of just trusting it, which is the scariest part. I mean, even my 81-year-old mom trusts AI. ARP has to send out bulletins about AI. They've never done that about TCP or cloud. Think about that. And so it's affecting so many segments of society. Of course, business wants to take advantage of that. But of course, we need better controls in place, and we need to rethink governance, not as a hindrance to business, but as an enabler. And governance needs to be more innovative. We need to be part of that innovation.
I agree. I want to ask you a little bit about ethical tech matters and your mission there to achieve compliance without complexity. Because I think that this is kind of where we, from an AI governance perspective and just governance in general, right? And I was just talking to a compliance leader earlier this morning about just audits and how audits can blow up. If you're not just answering the questions that are being asked and you're not being succinct with your questions, it can kind of blow up if you start adding a lot of stuff to it. You know, your 5 whys, you know, your why. You know, if you're not answering the question, you can create more confusion in the governance process, right? What I've seen, you know, going again, kind of like, you know, compliance without complexity, that mission. We're talking about this, but I think there's probably a more succinct way that we can explain to our viewers what AI governance and IEEE certified entails. How do those things kind of come together for us?
So for me, I was, like you said, 2 decades in fairly large multinational company. Complexity was every day. Dealing with ambiguity was a skill set, right? And so when it comes to compliance, you don't want that. You want to have real clear objectives. You want to be able to go in, work with the business, and understands that you have to right size controls. Every control is not for every business unit, and it's not for every industry either. And so you're right. I have admitted to being a 5 why person, but a lot of my whys are around your process. What are you doing? What can you show me you have compliance about? How are you doing it? What technology controls do you have in place? And so I think my blended background helps a lot with that. But for me, compliance should not be complex. As a business leader, you should know what are my top 5 compliance regulations, internal standards I have to comply with. If I were going to be on the evening news, which one would impact my ability to either get budget, my company's reputation, or our ability to even trade on the stock market? And I think when you start thinking about compliance like that, it becomes a business enabler instead of, oh my God, here comes audit. I've got to answer this 100-page checklist. I think as business leaders, you can really help drive that audit conversation with really knowing your business, like I said, the 5 internal, external standards that really impact you. And then, of course, knowing where you touch personal identifiable data, IP data, and what are your technical controls. And so you have a staff, get them out there. Basically, an audit brief you kind of hand to them and say, okay, go back and come back to me. But what else do you need to see?
No, I like your approach, especially executive and senior business leaders. They really do need to understand the risk to their business. And a lot of times, or what I see is a lot of focus on is go to market. How is it that we make a sale? What is it that what features do we need to have to make a sale? Which is, again, I want to see that happen, right? But I think the next level of threat to the business isn't actually hackers, like just on the cybersecurity space, just in general. It's not really the hackers or the insider risks that are your problem. They can be impactful to their business, but the one that's most pressing is the compliance people. It's the government regulations, and those are the things that can have a serious impact to your business. And those are real risks that the business needs to be thinking about. And I like your approach of what are your 5 external, what are your 5 internal, right? That you need to be in compliance with. And you don't need to know everything, but you need to know the 5 that are most impactful to your business, to the entire business. Like you said, is this something that's going to get me delisted? Is this something that's going to cost me 4% of my turnover? For GDPR? Is this something that's going to cost me 7% of my turnover for AI in Europe? These things are really kind of problems that are career limiting moves if that becomes your problem as a business leader. And so you should know what those are, and you should definitely know what your teams are doing about it. And of course, I always feel like I have a good relationship with audit, myself as a CISO, because we're both kind of working on the same thing. We're trying to protect the business. We're trying to highlight what it is that are the biggest risks to the business, me from the technology side mostly, but audit from a global, just general business perspective, like what's happening. And where those converge today seems to be a lot of overlap. So I always feel like my tacit knowledge of how technology is being used has a lot in what the roadmap looks like. I often need audits help to help make sure that the business is aware of the risks, and that the board's aware of the risks, and the executive committee is aware of the risks, so that we're all on the same page on how we are going to think about it. Because again, I'd love to make sure that technology teams are doing what they're supposed to do, but it helps me a whole lot better when the business side also is pressing for those same requirements also. So it's like kind of like a coming from 2 flanks kind of perspective.
So I think you hit on a really good point there. They do have to know their business. CISOs, anybody in the C-suite has to be able to work with audit, and audit has to be able to translate those compliance risks to business risk. If I walk in there and tell you I could sprout every NIST standard and every EU regulation or even the new US AI Act, just bore you to death with those standards, right? But if I cannot translate it to your business for you to understand the business risk, most people in the C-suite are not concerned. And so you have to be able, as compliance professionals, to be able to equate those things to business risk. So if I say to you, okay, you have no idea that your data is going cross-border, are you willing to sign a material risk level, an MRL, that you accept that business risk? And so if I put it like that, if you're telling me you're willing to accept a business risk, that if the company is fined for violating cross-border data, and I give you that number, you get it. You're like, okay, so what exactly are you looking for to make sure that I can assure through that MRL process that I am protecting that as a CISO? And that usually gets their attention. They don't want to hear about you've got a hole in your port or any of those things. You got my attention at that point.
And I would agree. I think there's two things about that. One is, making it a material risk, right? Like, what is this risk, right? What does this mean? What's that range of problem that you're saying you're going to accept? Sometimes I see that we allow business leaders to take risks. Like in procurement, they couldn't sign a $10 million check, right? But they can sign a $40 million risk or 7% risk or whatever, 4% of turnover kind of risk. And I'm always kind of surprised at how much risk that we allow business leaders to accept. One is or do we have a believable number? Do we really think it's a existential threat kind of number? Is it 4% of our turnover is what this risk actually is? There's so much FUD, and fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the numbers that we as cyber kind of and audit probably represent, getting alignment on high, medium, and lows and how big of a risk that is and what the material impact is. I think that's a big issue between the business, cyber, and audit to make sure that we're all in agreement of what that is. Otherwise, we can present a material risk. And if no one believes it, then people sign. It has to be believable. It has to be agreed upon. And then you can get someone to say, if I can write a $10 million check for procurement, great, then I can take a $10 million risk. But that delegation of authority with respect to spend and risk, I think that's something else that's also missing in a lot of organizations. Also, how much risk are they able to pile onto their business before it needs to go up to that next level of a business leader? Is this something the CEO needs to sign up on? Is this something that the board, needs to sign off on? Because like a recent company, a $25 million procurement had to be, the executive committee had to have a vote on it to say we're going to buy this contract. I don't see the same kind of processes in the risk management space. Is it just where I've been working, or do you think that other folks have better solutions for this?
So no, I don't think people have better solutions for this. I think we're still operating under I'm going to say the year 2000 kind of rules in some areas of our business, which now are bigger risks. So you brought up procurement. Procurement is the door in, out. It's a big budget area. It's a spend area. But how many times have we really looked at procurement? That's the gateway into your whole enterprise. And so with AI, we think about traditional procurement. We're thinking there's someone sitting there, maybe our Reba somewhere is reviewing contracts. We've got all of our ISS, our security clauses in there, our data clauses. And we're not thinking about AI. I could literally bring in some innocent looking product. Someone internally spins it up, or maybe it doesn't even come through official procurement. Spins it up, starts using my corporate data, and is out there representing me to the world. We've had episodes where now our search results in those GPTs out on the internet. That wasn't some $25 million product. This is the one that kills me. Companies that say, I'm not going to be AI enabled. And then they have O365 or they have some other productivity suite that has Copilot or another AI agent enabled, and you're not turning it on, but you're using it in Outlook, you're using it in Excel, you're using it in Word. So you really are AI enabled, just not to the extent you think your customers are. But we have to start re-looking at our mindset. IT in general has been looked at more as a cost center. Now we're seeing more revenue generating IT centers. We're going to see more IT innovation, especially around being able to take an internal product that has cleaned up your internal environment with AI. You should have had governance should be involved in that. And that same governance team should be able to translate if we offer this product externally through an Apple store, a Google store, into those enterprise stores, how do we protect it externally as well? And I think that's where governance has to change. We kind of have taken the you have to comply stick. You can't do that with AI. It's too prevalent. It's too fast moving. It's too business changing. It changes the landscape for even business competition.
I mean, I think that you're bringing up a really good point around like procurement and contracts and how products get into our environment. And again, this is kind of like there's like a gate. How do you get in? But because of SaaS technologies, like you were saying, like Microsoft O365 or M365, whatever they call it today, they're just turning on Gen AI features in all their products. And it takes active management to keep them turned off. Right.
Right.
And again, I think that if you don't have the processes in place to control your technology, you're getting less and less controls because of more companies are adopting SaaS-based solutions to drive IT delivery, right? So we're delivering more through SaaS than we did in our own data centers and such. So we have less controls of like, hey, how do we manage the upgrade cycle? And again, like you're saying, it's like now you have more and more AI tools on products that you would not have think that you need AI. 5 years ago, you never would have thought Outlook needed AI, but now it's like rewriting emails for you inside of Outlook, right? Or helping you with your Teams messages, or helping you with grammar in Word. There's just so many places that we're seeing AI being used. Companies are AI enabled without even knowing it, right? They may not be using Copilot, or they may not be using Chat GPT or Perplexity or Claude or Anthropic's tool sets, but their internal tools are, right? Adobe Photoshop, et cetera. All these tools that we're using are creating, again, potentially ethical risks, to how you want to present yourself out to the world as a company, but also data risks, et cetera, of how do you control the data and who has access to that data. There's a lot of risks that are being associated with that. And I just don't think that, the big vendors have an incentive to make sure that they're looking for adoption. They're looking to make their customers happy, which again, I applaud them for. But at the same time, as an enterprise user, enterprise trying to do the right thing, I think it's problematic on how those things get rolled out. And procurement's not going to be the entity that helps control that. There are just too many changes that happen, all the time. We talked about Goldman Sachs and the Apple Card, about a real world bad AI governance led to a consequence for an organization. Are there other ones that, are top of mind for you that we should be thinking about? And what could they have done differently?
So I think the big one is facial recognition.
Okay.
We've already had some governance challenge with facial recognition. There's a retail case where store chain was using facial recognition for shoplifters, not thinking about that the characteristics for visual AI recognition were biased. They weren't very transparent about how they were using it. And so people were being detained in the store. So we think about that, the lawsuit they faced, some of the regulations that they violated for your privacy around your image, your consent to be photographed and used in these databases for facial recognition. We think about that. That was probably about 3 years ago. And so what strikes me now is, have we come that far in governance that now when we go to the airport and we pass through security, we're being asked to take a picture, and facial recognition is being used on a very large scale. I think there's a project out by the AI Justice League. A lot of people don't even know you do have the right not to consent to be photographed at those airport checkpoints. And so just how are we informing people about how we're using their data? I think one of my biggest nightmares is someone stealing someone's face identity, that facial recognition data, and using it. It's on everything from signing into your computers to all type of different use cases for facial recognition. The governance around there needs to be tighter around consent. It needs to be tighter around how you dispose of those images. Where are you capturing them at? And what are you really using them about? There's so many conspiracy theories. Some of them really do kind of border on how we're not governing and not informing people or educating them about the use of AI in everyday life. So that's one I can think of. Of course, we all know of the different, the hiring bias, transparency there. There's just so many different use cases, and these use cases are 2 to 3 years old. Mm-hmm. If we think about what AI has achieved, the adoption rates for AI. We hear these tragic cases now of social impact due to relationships with AI. We have to get a better understanding, again, of what data are you using? How is AI actually using the algorithm to deliver back that product, that answer, that service? Are there safeguards in place to keep people from actually being harmed by it? And sometimes it's not necessarily people. There are still some ecological impacts of AI we don't really talk about a lot that we need to start getting into those conversations. But I will say there's a lot of challenge, but there's a lot of good, right? And so I learn something new every day. I see a new product every day that is really going out and addressing AI or using AI and really understanding that we talk about human fatigue, but AI also has decision fatigue. So who is looking at the accountability and traceability of the decisions AI is making? And then as CISO, you need to really start redefining what is your environment, right? And so that traditional anything inside my firewall is mine, you probably need to start really rethinking that. Is that really still true? And one of the things I saw here recently that really opened my eyes was SquareX's presentation at Tech Field Day. So that expanding where the threats are actually coming into that browser level, that EDR, that extension level. So people are using the technology different. Are there protections in place out even to the parts of your environment you never even thought a threat could come through?
Yeah, you're talking about about just like the AI browsers and extensions that have allow you to use AI agents inside your
Mhm.
browser today. And going back to the guardrails around these technologies and what it is that we're asking people to do when people spend so much, that perimeter has changed. Like you said, most CISOs think about it, what's inside my data center, what's inside my office spaces, and they might expand that thought to the cloud and what they're doing in the cloud, but their perimeter has actually changed all over the place, meaning that
Mhm.
we use so many SaaS applications today that we know about, and then there's all the shadow SaaS that we don't know about, and then there's the shadow AI component of the shadow SaaS that everyone's using that we don't know about, including all the applications that we have that are running inside of our space. I mean, it's just a vastly different environment. And
Mhm.
then we kind of went from we had a firewall as a perimeter, and then we started talking about identity as the perimeter, right? And now with browser AI agents or AI enabled browsers, now the identity that's being used by the AI to interact with services is our
Mhm.
identity. We're allowing that AI agent to use
Exactly.
our identity to connect to different systems. And they're enthusiastic, unskilled players in this space that have no security training and no guardrails on what we can do. And, we're kind of at that place where it's like all of a sudden it's like, you don't have to worry about, hey, did John click that phishing link? Maybe it wasn't John. Maybe it was the AI agent inside the browser that clicked that link because they were trying to help us, plan our schedule better or whatever it is that we're
Right.
trying to
Previewing it
do.
in
Right.
Outlook.
Yeah.
That's the big one, right?
Yeah. And so if you think about the downstream impact of that, right, where it's like you don't know if it was you or the AI agent, and all of this interactions happening through the browser, whether it's a AI enabled extension or some AI tool that you're using inside of another app, those guardrails on how you manage extensions, how you do OAuth consents, what systems you're allowed to log into, and et cetera. It's like the browser is right there in the middle of all of it, and it's that's one place that where our users are interacting with, and that's where they're working. More thought needs to be placed in how we control that, and how do we control access to these applications that are all AI enabled. And I'm just waiting for the lawsuits and stuff to start happening, court cases and everything around bad things that happen to good people because they just don't have the right kind of governance and controls. Like you said, it's like, are you giving people guidance? No. Okay, bad. Do you have detective or preventive controls? Uh, I don't know. Do you have administrative controls around this? Probably not. Right. So
And they're
it's like,
probably not the right controls,
and
right?
they're
Because
probably not the right.
browser It's like a big Trojan horse. It looks friendly. Everyone can click on it.
That's right.
Get something new and shiny from it. That is the one that scares me. The AI enabled browsers, what our users are pulling in, what we already have enabled when we're saying we're not AI enabled,
Yep.
that's pulling in that stuff. And that's one I see it as one of the bigger threats because it just looks so nice, so innocent.
Everything. I
You
mean,
can pull in anything.
people make beautiful websites that get you to click. I mean, there's some
Yeah.
great products out there, but I mean, if they're not part of your governance structure inside the enterprise, then, you're putting yourself at risk. I mean, I know that of a couple of cases where we had users, and this has happened to me at many different companies, so no particular company, but many times we have development engineers that go and get their own AWS accounts and they're using their corporate credentials to do it, but then trying to claw that back as, hey, this is actually our technology is like, that's not easy to do. I think I had like 7 months of going back and forth with AWS legal, trying to capture like 7 or 8 accounts that were outside of our control. That takes time and there's risk associated with it. And that's true with the big cloud providers, but it's also true of every shadow SaaS app that we're dealing with. I mean, that problem space is huge, right? And it's so easy for people to say, sign in with Google or add a new account and add apps to their place. And it's all happening right through the browser. And these beautiful little websites that are selling us all the time, so the more controls we can get there, I think, are the better. Well, I want we talked a lot about AI. We talked about governance in the real world. We talked a little bit about browser security, which thank you for bringing it up. But let's talk a little bit about creativity. Besides your compliance work, you're also a podcast host for the Tech Aunties podcast. How has this creative storytelling experience changed how you approach the analytical world of AI governance?
So I am absolutely blessed to have a co-host I've known for over 10 years. We worked together in the trenches, Gina Rosenthal. She invited me to be her co-host of the Tech Aunties. And there I get to really show myself. I get to kind of put aside the regulatory why, and really get into my own personal curiosity. I'm a lifelong learner, so I love hearing other people's perspectives, seeing new products, hearing new use cases, hearing new pain points I've never thought of. And so I love the work. We're actually coming up with a new season. We'll be debuting here coming up pretty soon. You can catch us. We still have our archive episodes out on Apple and Spotify and YouTube. You can follow us on LinkedIn. But it actually gives me the opportunity to meet so many people that I probably wouldn't get to meet. And so I just really enjoy that.
I can totally appreciate that. I mean, before I joined SquareX, I'd never been involved with, podcasting and talking to people like this. I love it. I love hosting folks and learning from them. I know I can be challenging. Everyone that's worked for me will tell you that I can be very challenging. And but no, I learned so much from you today. Before we close, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, as someone who contributes to the IEEE AI standards, what emerging AI compliance challenge are most organizations not thinking about yet? What should I be thinking about?
So I think you need to really be thinking about the fundamentals. We all see AI as a space age thing, and we're forgetting the fundamentals. Why are we using it? How are we using it? Where are we using it? And so what you really should be worried about is, do I know where my enterprise stops? And do I know where my threats are from an AI perspective? And if you look at your traditional threat models, you should have your AI threats right there beside them. And so if I deploy AI internally, I still need to look at my threat model, my threat landscape, all the things that could possibly go wrong internally and externally, and how I'm mitigating them. And then how do I get my compliance team to help me?
Yeah, I think that it's such a fast-paced, I think it's somewhat of an overwhelming pace. And again, going back to the SaaS and the way that we do IT delivery today, with so much being, online, that we're not even controlling the versions of the software that we're using as we kind of go through. So I think that pace and where those changes happen are somewhat overwhelming to our governance teams, whether it's a CISO and the CISO is part of the governance, or if it's a separate governance team, it doesn't really matter. I think it's a lot of activity that's happening right now. And for those professionals who are overwhelmed by the pace of AI evolution and regulation, what's your best piece of unconventional advice to not just survive, but thrive in this space?
So look for ways that you can partner with AI, human oversight for AI. Really, I think about my career. I think about all the times that I spent doing tasks that didn't take advantage of my expertise. If I could go back in time and be this new IT newbie and have AI, I could think of a lot of tasks I would feed it immediately, right? But with guardrails. So all the PowerPoints, all the spreadsheets, human oversight. We have to start educating and making people aware of the best use case for AI, in my opinion, is AI and human oversight. We hear a lot of conversations about AI replacing this, AI replacing that. They're even using it in churches to deliver sermons. Think about that. It's infiltrating every area of society, but it still needs human oversight, or we're not serving the technology well. We're definitely not serving the future well, and we're definitely not servicing ourselves well. If we don't start thinking about human oversight, it's still just a tool. And what I would hate to see, we went through a tech bubble burst before, that we go through the same thing with AI. The technology is good. The use cases need to be better.
Love it. I think you're absolutely right. I think that it's a tool, right? I think and we need to figure out how do we use that tool well, and how we can use it. Like you said, I would love to use, if I had to go back to some of my early days, there's lots of tasks that I would feed AI today, but still we need the human critical thinking to make sure that
Right.
that it's all coming together, the way that our organizations need and represent, our organization's interest well. So thank you for that, Marian. It was great having you on the show.
It was great talking to you. I enjoyed it. I felt natural, so it was good.